One of the tools that was included in your toolkit was the dial calipers. Dial calipers are extremely useful, allowing you to measure precise dimensions on many different parts and in different ways. There's 3 ways you use the dial calipers to measure. You have the jaws that allow you to measure the outer dimensions of a part, the jaws at the top that allow you to measure inner dimensions, and then you have the slider that slides down, which allows you to measure depth. You can see the dial caliper has these different dials, and you can utilize these dials to help you find your measurements. The main dial that you will use is the dial here that you will turn with your thumb to open and close the jaws, allowing you to make measurements. When you open it to a certain measurement and you want to lock it in, you can use the dial at the top to lock it in. Now I can't move the slider dial. Let's look at how you'll read the measurements on the dial caliper. Along the slider section here, you see a ruler. This will give you your first measurement point. Notice on my dial caliper, I know that my units will be in inches. When I get the ruler to display a 1, I know that this is 1 inch. So as I go along from 0 to 1, I know that this is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, and so on. Once my jaw reaches past the 1, I can start saying 1 point, and then if it's past this next 1, it would be 1.1. These numbers here are the first number after the decimal place. The larger numbers at the top along the ruler are the first numbers before the decimal place. In order to know what the number is for your measurement, you have to reveal that tick mark after you slide open the jaw. So if you look on the screen here, we've not quite gotten to 0.1. Even though this dial has moved, the 1 is not showing on the slide here. Now it's showing, notice how the tick mark shows, and my dial is past the 0 point. So I can now say 0.1. The 2 tick mark shows, so now I'm at 0.2, and so on. Now that we know our tens place, let's talk about what values come after that. The values after the tens place are found using the dial. As I slide open the dial caliper, I can see the dial is changing positions, and I can see that it's going to read a certain number. So right here, I can see that my dimension that I'm measuring is 0.2 because the 3 tick mark is not showing. So it's 0.2, and then I go to my dial and I can see that it's 70. So 0.270. If I move it open a little bit more, this is measuring 0.426. So the dial gives you your hundredth and thousandth place after the decimal. Now let's look at the different items that you can measure using the dial caliper. The main jaws here can measure outer dimensions. So for instance, you're going to be measuring your barbed fitting with your dial caliper, and you can measure these outer dimensions using the outer jaws here. If you place the barbed fitting between the jaw, you can see I get a dimension of 0.440 for this outer dimension around the hex part of the barbed fitting. Notice you don't want to over tighten it because then you can get erroneous information, and you want to make sure it's not too loose because then it's not the right dimension as well. You just want to have the parts setting on the jaws, allowing you to get the dimension. Another dimension that you might want to find is an inner dimension. I'll use the glue cap on this glue stick to show you how to get that measurement. Maybe I need to get the inner diameter of this glue cap. So I can use the inner dimension section of my dial caliper. You place the dial caliper inside the part that you're measuring. When you slide the dial to open the part, you can see those teeth opening up. It gives you flat parts to press onto your part that you're measuring, so you can measure it. You don't want to overturn the dial because that can stretch your part. You just want it to, again, just rest on it. And I get my dimension to be 0.710. The third type of dimension you can measure using the dial caliper is depth. Notice when you slide the dial caliper open, you have this portion of the ruler that sticks out. This portion allows you to measure depth. You can slide the dial caliper dial such that you insert the depth measuring portion into the part that you're trying to measure. Line it up and get it to rest on the part. And now you can have your depth measured as well. Looking at your dial caliper, I see that it is 0.0738. So those are the 3 ways you can use the dial caliper to find measurements. One other thing that I want to point out with your dial caliper, you do want to make sure that it is calibrated properly. Sometimes the dial caliper can get off, and maybe the dial, when you have it completely closed, the dial is not set to 0. You always want to have it set to 0 before you start measuring. You can easily turn the dial face in order to get that dial, when it's at its resting position, to be at 0. The final tip I'll discuss with you is when you're measuring your barbed fitting and you need to get the depth of this barbed fitting, the end of your dial caliper will not fit in that hole. So what I recommend you do is use some type of device. Maybe it's the end of a paper clip, maybe it's one of the wires in your kit. You can take it and stick it into your part for however far you need it to go, and then mark on the tool you're using to help you measure where it stops, and then you can have that dimension on the paper clip or the wire or whatever you use to help you measure that depth. And then from there you can use the scale that was included in your kit to get the measurement of that depth.